10 people, 10 individuals connected to America's most classified programs: nuclear weapons, advanced aerospace, fusion energy, space defense. 10 people who knew things that almost nobody else on Earth was allowed to know. And one by one, they have been vanishing. Some walked out of their homes and were never seen again. Others were found dead. And as of April 2026, the White House itself has been forced to acknowledge that something deeply troubling may be happening in the shadows of the United States government. This is not a movie. This is not a thriller novel. These are real people, with real names, real careers, and real families. And right now, nobody in authority has been able to explain why they keep disappearing. The story begins to take its clearest shape when you line up the names and dates side by side. Anthony Chavez, 79 years old, a retired employee of the Los Alamos National Laboratory, one of the most secure and secretive nuclear research facilities in the entire country, disappeared on May 4th, 2025. He walked out of his home in New Mexico on foot, leaving behind his car, his keys, his wallet, and his phone. Nobody has seen him since. The Los Alamos Police Department confirmed over a year later that their search was still ongoing and that no new information had come to light. Then came Melissa Casillas, 54 years old, an active administrative assistant at the same Los Alamos National Laboratory, a woman who investigators believe held top-level security clearance for some of the most sensitive data at the facility. She disappeared on June 26, 2025, just weeks after Chavez vanished. She too walked out of her home in New Mexico on foot. She too left behind everything: her vehicle, her keys, her wallet, her phone. She too has never been found. Two people from the same nuclear laboratory disappearing under nearly identical circumstances within 2 months of each other, with no explanation and no resolution. Monica Jacinto Reza was the director of the Materials Processing Group at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California. She was 60 years old. She had co-created a nickel-based metal alloy specifically engineered for rocket engines, and her work had received funding from the Air Force Research Laboratory. On June 22, 2025, she went hiking with a friend in the Angeles National Forest along a well-traveled trail. Her companion was walking about 30 feet ahead of her. He turned to check on her. She smiled and waved at him. He turned back to continue walking. Seconds later, when he looked back again, she was gone. Completely gone, off a well-traveled trail in broad daylight in the space of a few seconds. Monica Reza has not been seen or heard from since. Stephen Garcia, 48 years old, was a government contractor working for the Kansas City National Security Campus facility in Albuquerque, New Mexico. This facility is not a minor operation. It manufactures more than 80% of all non-nuclear components used in the construction of America's entire nuclear weapons arsenal. Garcia served as a property custodian at the facility, a position that gave him top security clearance and broad access to equipment and assets worth tens, potentially hundreds of millions of dollars, some of it classified. On August 28, 2025, surveillance cameras captured him walking out of his home on Cattail Court Southwest in Albuquerque at approximately 9 in the morning, wearing a green camouflage shirt and shorts. He was carrying a handgun and a bottle of water. He left behind his phone, his wallet, his keys, and his car. Stephen Garcia has not been seen since. These were not people who showed signs of distress or instability before they vanished. These were professionals with high-level clearances, trusted by the United States government with access to some of the most sensitive national security information in existence. And then they simply stopped existing, at least as far as anyone can see. Nuno Loureiro was the director of the Plasma Science and Fusion Center at MIT. He was widely regarded as one of the leading physicists working on plasma science and fusion energy, a field that sits at the intersection of advanced weapons research and the future of clean energy. On December 15, 2025, Loureiro was attacked in his own home in Brookline, Massachusetts. He was shot by a gunman who turned out to be a former classmate from Portugal. Loureiro died the following day. Authorities identified and arrested the suspect. The case had a named perpetrator, a resolved investigation, and yet it still sits uncomfortably on this list, alongside all the others, in a way that nobody can quite explain away. Carl Grillmeyer was a 67-year-old astrophysicist at the California Institute of Technology. He spent decades contributing to major NASA-backed scientific missions, including work on the Hubble Space Telescope, the Spitzer Space Telescope, and the NEOWISE and NEO-Surveyor missions, which are designed to detect and track near-Earth asteroids. His research also had direct applications in missile tracking technology used by the United States Air Force. On February 16, 2026, at 6 in the morning, Grillmeyer was shot and killed on the front porch of his own home. A 29-year-old suspect was arrested and charged with murder, as well as separate charges of carjacking and burglary. Investigators noted that the suspect had reportedly been observed trespassing on Grillmeyer's property in the weeks before the shooting. William Neal McCasland was a retired United States Air Force Major General. His career in the military placed him at the center of some of the most advanced and sensitive technology programs in American defense history. He commanded the Air Force Research Laboratory at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, a facility that has for decades been at the center of speculation surrounding the government's advanced technology programs and its handling of unidentified aerial phenomena. He also commanded the Phillips Research Site at Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico, and he oversaw the Air Force's Science and Technology Program, a program valued at more than $2.2 billion. McCaslin's name appeared in the 2016 WikiLeaks release of emails from Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman, with references indicating McCaslin had worked on issues related to unidentified aerial phenomena disclosure. On the morning of February 27, 2026, McCaslin walked out of his home near Quail Run Court Northeast in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He left without his phone, without his wearable devices, and without his prescription glasses. He was 68 years old, and without his glasses, he would have significant difficulty seeing. He was carrying only a .38 caliber revolver. His wife called 911. She told dispatchers that her husband appeared to be trying not to be found. McCaslin has not been seen since. By April 2026, the count of scientists, contractors, and officials connected to classified nuclear, aerospace, and defense programs who had either vanished or died under unclear circumstances since mid-2024 had reached 10. The pattern was impossible to ignore. Reporters began asking questions. Lawmakers began making calls. Former FBI Assistant Director Chris Swecker spoke publicly about the situation and said that the rational explanation, if these cases were not simply random, was modern-day espionage. Swecker said that American scientists and researchers had been targeted for years by hostile foreign intelligence services, particularly in the areas of rocket propulsion and nuclear technology. He named multiple countries whose intelligence agencies have systematically pursued American scientific personnel with access to sensitive knowledge, including China, Russia, Pakistan, India, Iran, and North Korea. He was explicit. If these cases were connected, it was not a domestic crime story. It was an intelligence war being waged against the people who know America's deepest secrets. Tennessee Congressman Tim Burchett stated publicly that the numbers in these specific research areas were unusually high, and that the American public should not simply trust the government to be transparent about what was happening. Representative Eric Burleson contacted the FBI directly and requested a formal investigation into whether the cases were connected. On April 15, 2026, Fox News reporter Peter Doocy asked White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt directly about the situation during a briefing. He told her that 10 American scientists had either gone missing or died since mid-2024, that they all reportedly had access to classified nuclear or aerospace material, and he asked whether anyone was investigating whether these cases were connected. Leavitt initially said she had not spoken to the relevant agencies about it. Then, within hours, the White House released a formal statement. The press secretary wrote that in light of the recent and legitimate questions about these troubling cases and President Trump's commitment to the truth, the White House was actively working with all relevant agencies and the FBI to holistically review all of the cases together and identify any potential commonalities. She added that no stone would be unturned. President Trump himself addressed the situation and called it pretty serious stuff. He told reporters he hoped the deaths and disappearances were random. He also said the administration expected to know more within a week and a half. Those are not the words of a president who is entirely confident that the pattern is coincidental. To understand the full weight of what these disappearances might mean, you need to understand what kinds of knowledge these individuals carried. Los Alamos National Laboratory is not a regular research institution. It was the birthplace of the atomic bomb, the site where the Manhattan Project produced the weapons that ended World War II. Today, it remains one of the primary facilities where the United States designs, develops, and maintains its nuclear weapons stockpile. The people who work there, even in administrative roles, often hold clearances that give them access to information the government considers among the most sensitive in the world. An administrative assistant with top security clearance at Los Alamos is not a minor figure. That person potentially has access to facility layouts, personnel records, schedules, and operational details that hostile foreign intelligence services would spend enormous resources to obtain. The Kansas City National Security Campus is similarly critical and similarly unknown to most Americans. If you understand that it manufactures more than 80% of all the non-nuclear components that go into every nuclear weapon in the American arsenal, you begin to grasp why a property custodian at that facility with top security clearance represents a significant intelligence target. A person in that role knows what is in the building. They know what equipment exists, where it is stored, how it is used, and what its capabilities are. To a foreign intelligence service trying to understand American nuclear weapons construction at the operational level, that kind of knowledge is extraordinarily valuable. The NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory connection adds another disturbing dimension. JPL is responsible for some of the most advanced spacecraft and propulsion technology in American history. Its researchers work at the intersection of deep space exploration and national security applications. The line between civilian aerospace research and military defense technology at an institution like JPL is often deliberately blurred, because the same breakthroughs that allow a spacecraft to navigate to Mars can also improve the guidance systems of long-range missiles. Monica Reza's work on advanced metal alloys for rocket engines, funded in part by the Air Force Research Laboratory, sits exactly on that boundary. Her disappearance from a busy hiking trail in broad daylight without a trace remains one of the most disturbing individual cases in the entire collection. The case of Major General Neil McCasland adds a layer that goes beyond the nuclear and aerospace angles. His connection to unidentified aerial phenomena, documented through WikiLeaks emails and through his leadership of the Air Force Research Laboratory, raises questions that few officials are willing to address on the record. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which McCasland commanded at a critical point in his career, has been at the center of UAP speculation for decades. Whether or not those allegations have factual basis, McCasland's disappearance at 68 years old from his New Mexico home without his phone, his glasses, or any rational explanation is difficult to fit into ordinary frameworks. Former FBI Assistant Director Chris Swecker was clear when he spoke publicly about what the pattern suggested to him professionally. He said that the first thing you go to is potential espionage. He said American scientists had been targeted for a long time by hostile foreign intelligence services, especially in rocket propulsion. He said that if the cases were connected, it was not a random crime story. It was a systematic effort by foreign powers to strip America of the human knowledge that underpins its most sensitive capabilities. Knowledge that cannot be extracted from a classified document by a hacker can still be extracted from a human being who carries it in their memory. That is the oldest form of intelligence work, and it is still the most effective. What is important to understand is what authorities have and have not confirmed. Law enforcement agencies have not established any official, verified connection between any of these cases. Some of the disappearances have been characterized by local investigators as possible self-endangerment situations, where individuals may have walked away from their lives voluntarily. No confirmed evidence of foul play has been announced in the missing persons cases. The murders of Loureiro and Grillmare have identified suspects and follow investigative logic that does not obviously link them to the others. Official caution is appropriate and necessary, but official caution does not make the pattern disappear. 10 individuals connected to nuclear weapons, advanced propulsion, plasma physics, and aerospace defense. 10 cases in roughly 2 years, multiple concentrated in the same state around the same facilities, following nearly identical patterns of behavior on the day they vanished. Former senior. Intelligence and law enforcement officials publicly suggesting that espionage is the most rational, non-random explanation. And a White House that has now moved from silence to an active FBI review in the span of a single press briefing. The truth behind what is happening in the shadows of America's most classified institutions may not be known for months, years, or perhaps ever. Classified. Investigations rarely produce public conclusions. The people who know the most about what is happening are the same people who are required by law to say nothing. But the pattern exists, the names are real, the cases are open, and the question that nobody in authority has yet answered is the simplest and most disturbing question of all: why do the people who know America's deepest secrets keep disappearing?